As retailers entered the lockdown in March 2020, a small, diverse group of Canadian thought leaders gathered to virtually speculate, collaborate, and share their insights on the waves of disruption facing retailers. The Business of Retail podcast emerged as an unflinching strategic alternative to the conventional discourse, revealing challenges in the headlines and exploring new, unconventional paths for all facets of the retail industry. Now, here's the panel.
Welcome to the Business of Retail podcast. We're a group of Canadians with a global perspective on retail. You can find out more about us on our website at thebusinessofretail.ca or LinkedIn, Twitter, and you can also listen to us on Apple or Spotify or any other platform that you wish to look up. And if we're not on it, reach out to us and we'll see if we get ourselves up there. I'd like to introduce our team that shows up here regularly and helps me and help each other create havoc. Gary Newberry, Craig Patterson, Christine Cowan, and David Ian Gray, and myself, George Minikakis. So welcome. And our topic for today is waking up from the big sleep. Now, I'm not sure about you guys, but the nap has been a little too long for me, probably about 11 months too long. So my question is, what happens now? And as we wake up, what is it that we want to do? The consumers want to do? Are we going to be ready for them? How long is it going to last? Are things going to get, some question marks out there? Are we heading for the roaring 20s? I've heard others saying that it's the big bust. What are we looking at? Let's start with Craig.
Yeah, good question. Roaring 20s. We don't know. I think it's going to take some time, and I think it really depends what's going to happen. So I just finished talking to some brokers about lease deals being done, and so what we're seeing is a lot of retailers that are signing leases in anticipation of the roaring 20s. I won't name the retailers because we haven't reported on them yet, but they're big, and we've got some that are over 100 stores that they're looking at opening and are anticipating growth in the market, which I think is interesting. But I don't know. I think it's going to take years for the industry to come back. There's going to be certain segments of the population that I think are going to be hesitant to go out again. But I think that certain segments of the population will have some revenge spending, if they might call it that, in terms of going out and spending money, and hopefully that will propel the economy. But I don't think it's going to make up for things, and I don't know when the spending is going to come back, because what are the long-term implications of these business losses? We got Christina, who was talking about this recently with us. The fact that if we lose a lot of small businesses, we lose a tax base. This is going to hit our economy, and that's going to hit the consumer economy ultimately as well.
And Craig, you're referring to Christina Egget, who is the former owner of Lala's, right? That we profiled a while back, and you at Retail Insider, you did a really awesome depth piece that I encourage anyone to search and read.
Yeah, and watch episode 13 where Christina shares her story.
Yeah, the big sleep, right? I just think I'm always cranky when I wake up, but are people going to be cranky? Why is it called revenge spending, by the way?
Yeah, I don't know.
I hate the term because I don't think people are going to come out of this saying, I'm going to show you, you SOBs, I'm going to blow my bank account.
Yeah.
Right? Like, whoever came up with that is genius because it's running and gunning, but I think there'll be a surge. And I think, George, you made a point that has stuck with me, that if it's a consumable, like if it's a restaurant, you can only do so many bookings, right? So probably the worst thing to happen to hotels or restaurants would be like a complete peak demand for a short period of time, everyone trying to get in because there's only so much they can sell. And I guess for all retail, there's only so much inventory. But I think for retailers, they will feel, regardless of category, some love for physical retails for a little while. And then I think it's going to come back down.
Well, we've mentioned this before, though, that where you mentioned restaurants, for example. I heard something the other day that only during 2020, 1 in 10 transactions in a restaurant was delivered to a home. And in between 2021 to 2025, they expect that to go to 1 in 6. I mean, so there's a shift. There's a belief that there's a shift happening, right? Even though we are expecting a rebound of some sort. But when you think about rebounds, how many haircuts can you get? I mean, if you've missed 8 haircuts, right, you're going to get 1, not 8, right? Manicure, pedicure, how many? You can only correct it once and then go back to your cycle, right? So it's not going to all happen. It's not all, 8 months of revenue is not going to suddenly come back. I think it's gone.
And it could be pretty stressful for service providers in that case, right? I mean, just the pressure to serve that demand, and you can only do so much, as you're pointing out. That may not be. It's better than being closed, but it may not be a fun couple of months to be working in some of the businesses as they open up.
Well, and I also think a lot of these businesses had to shift to takeout, and you still have that. So you might have been a purely takeout, and or you've been sort of purely service, and now you've got this hybrid. And so managing that when you're trying to deliver food to people in the restaurant and then be taking all these orders on the sideline, like, that's not an easy situation for a smaller, restaurant to kind of deal with. So I think it's just interesting. We're down in Portland, we're opened up a lot more. We're at 50%, some places a little more. So we're seeing people kind of rush back to restaurants. And I was out yesterday trying out a new restaurant here. And but there's still all the protocols and the challenges, and you've got to kind of wait outside. So people are patient, they're waiting, and the weather was great, so it was easy. But it's just it's very different than it was before. So trying to manage through that for a lot of places, I think, is going to be a big challenge. You've got to stock all the stuff that you need for takeout and make sure that the people that are in the restaurant are not, getting less of a service because you're running around doing the other stuff.
Well, this is where accountants actually can earn their keep. And if there's any accountants listening, I don't know if anyone listens, so we're probably safe. But if there's accountants listening, I'm going to apologize for taking a cheap shot.
You've got a former accountant here, so I'm just...
In order to listen to us, you have got to tag into either Apple or Spotify, or get on the businessofretail.ca so that you can listen to us. So they are listening, David. You're just not, they're just not.
Okay, well, I guess I got to get plugged in. However, I do know at Earl's, for example, pretty big casual dining chain, they were putting together both takeout, but also sort of food baskets, but prepared, packaged home meal prep kits, if you want to call it that, with some drinks. The challenge with all that isn't just, can we do it to stay afloat, but, there's all new metrics. Like, what are the margins for that? When you spend your whole life doing one thing, you kind of instinctively know your numbers and what you got to hit. So I believe what I've been hearing is a lot of those organizations have really been pushing on their finance people all through the pandemic to, every time they try something, they've got to come up with a way to figure out if it's financially working. And I think it'll be interesting to see what comes out on the other side of it, because some things we like as shoppers or customers may not last because maybe they don't bring the money to the business.
Called online. Most of the accountants are told when they're looking at online as a new business venture or as something that's going to grow fast, it's like the number has to be this, and their job is to go to work to make that number fit. And in course, e-commerce takes off, and lots of costs come out the woodwork which weren't anticipated, or were maybe anticipated, but not at that scale or magnitude. And then they've got the unenviable task of comparing it to their cost model and these costs, actual out-of-pocket costs, and comparing, shuffling down the corridor and going, boss, I think we made a mistake. Well, it's your fault. You're the accountant. So very people who are persuaded to fix numbers are not necessarily the same people you want to actually have an informed discussion about, should we be even doing this? So my thought on the wider point of revenge spending, what's it going to look like, when we're going to surface from this? And I think that we've certainly talked about around this offline. And I've always maintained the position that September 2022 might be the point where we start to see some I wouldn't say green shoots of recovery, but I think we've still got a good year ahead of us as we kind of get through the vaccines, start to venture out back to stores, particularly. Maybe we may rush out to restaurants and stuff like that for the sheer novelty of going somewhere. But that may wear quite thin, especially when you go to a particular area that used to have a nostalgic memory that, had all like, I remember a street in Bournemouth in the UK where it literally was like a food court on a high street. They had Vietnamese, a whole range of different nationality food. And you could walk for about a mile. I reckon most of those will have gone. So you go to that old restaurant you hope was still there. In my time, it's Harpo's, and maybe it's not. And so you look around, you go, oh, so the other one's not there. So
that's a great point.
I think the basic econometric models that government are looking at, in some ways the media are referring to economists who are using these old models based on old historic patterns. I don't think they're moving fast enough to adjust to what we're seeing. And so their hope is, don't worry, revenge spending is a W, a V, or whatever it might be, when the unfortunate thing might be an A. It might go up and it might career down at a great rate of knots.
Well, I think, but that spike, Gary, I wanted to hear from you on another point, which is, and I'm thinking more for retailers, not food service, to be able to stock for something like that. Like, how does that get tackled within the logistics function of not the independents, but the chain retailers?
Yeah.
How do you time that, and how do you make sure that when it comes, you're not sitting there with empty shelves?
Yeah, it's a really complex problem because somebody has to take a punt. The punt is what's the classy word, the forecast. So somebody has to put a forecast up to say that this event's going to happen here, and we work back from there to make sure we've got all the stock in our system. And if we're in an geographically extended supply chain, we may be having to do something right now, place an order for it to come over on the boat, somehow smuggle through Los Angeles, cross-border, if it can, get it into our network, get out to the stores. Oops, the consumers have changed their mind. Our forecast is now flawed. So you have this situation, and I think Nordstrom have had aspects of this. I've seen their supply chain head being on lots of webinars saying how brilliant they are, and guess what? Just come out of the last quarter report saying we've got a big inventory problem. Some part of that may have been the Los Angeles thing. Some part of it may be that forecast didn't materialize. So there's lots of at one level, it's quite a simple logistics problem because it's just, getting A and B matching. But down on the ground, when you're talking about 10, 20, 30, 40,000 SKUs or whatever it is that have to be positioned across a network of 200, 300, 400 stores, that's quite a complex problem.
Especially when you don't know the date. Sorry, Chris.
No, I was going to say, Gary, I wonder about that too, because it's such sort of a, the typical model where it's like build the product and then, kind of go that way. And a lot of brands will design, get the buy, and then build. And I feel like manufacturing and things like that are going to change, especially, with the uncertainty of China. Yeah. Will we see more, domestic manufacturing, more local production, more nimbleness in terms of what consumers want and making sure that it's built to what their needs and wants are versus just mass build, huge amounts of product, all the same product, and then it's just really nothing exciting and unique and different. So, and I think with millennials and Gen Z too, like we've talked about this before, like the resale market and just their consumption and what's important to them. And then what's going to be really interesting is a lot of them are moving to the suburbs because they want to have space. I think, transportation back and forth, cars, etc. And then I just think we just talked about it earlier, our wardrobes, we're not at an office every day, we're working at home. And so most likely there'll be experiences and opportunities to go in. And Craig was mentioning that today, looks really great. He had a meeting, he's all dressed up, but for the most part, we're all in our sweatpants and just kind of hanging out and looking appropriate for Zoom. But, our wardrobes have changed and what we wear has changed. So I think those consumer experiences, either going to a restaurant and maybe we'll dress up, or going to work and we'll get a little more dressed up. But I think that conspicuous consumption maybe of the past and that constant consumerism may shift a little bit, because now the money's got to go into our homes. We have to have a home office, a home gym. We have to be able to live our lives here. So there's a lot of things that have shifted and changed, and we're not able to kind of do what we did before. So I think, there's going to be a dramatic shift in our future. And I don't think we will ever go back to exactly what we were before, but I don't think that's a bad thing.
Just, you raised a really super important point in terms of the fashion industry. If we can imagine like a continuous process, there's always this need to, what's new now, as a continuous stream of small minor innovation. Oh, that looks great. We've had a year off. We may have a year and a half, 2 years off before we actually resume. What will that resumption look like, especially when we've got broadly a year's worth of what was fashionable, last fashionable, still tucked away in our closets and stuff.
I'm calling for velour, Gary. Velour.
That the new black.
It's just, it's interesting. I've been reading a lot of really interesting articles lately from, long main stage fashion houses where most people would argue they haven't really evolved, but then there's something around the quality and the products, and they're meant to be bought by grandma and passed down 3 generations. And, whether that's a beautiful bag or, a tweed coat or whatever it is.
Or a watch, right?
Or a watch, exactly. We were talking about that. But I just, again, I think it's maybe just this mass consumerism and all of the fast fashion, and it's so bad for our environment, and there's so many negative things around that. I do think fashion is still going to continue, and innovation and design will continue, and we'll still see that. But I think it's going to be more selected. And I have this feeling that we as consumers are more savvy. We can choose the channel we want to shop in now. We, can go in store. We can, click and pick it up. We can do whatever we want. And so I think our needs and wants are shifting a little bit. And, we may be willing to wait a little longer for something that we really want. And we're now used to, the euphoria of like ordering something online, and then we wait and then we get it. And there's like a little euphoria there too. So there's kind of that piece of it as well versus going into retail. So it's just, I think it's all this sort of hybrid situation where things are going to be hybrid and things are going to be shifting, and you've got to be able to adapt and be nimble. And, I think we talked a lot about this in our last podcast with Claude, just how things are changing and how retailers are going to have to just be open-minded to new philosophies.
I think it all comes back to the consumer, right? And if I could just, right. And I believe, and I want to share this with you, and it's in the US data, but it's really interesting that they did a poll to try and understand how people are going to spend their upcoming stimulus check if they haven't already received it. I found it fascinating, right? So some 58% of them are planning to pay off debt with it. All right. The rest of them, about 28%, are going to spend it, right? They're going to, that portion of it, not all of it, they're going to spend it in the marketplace. And then the rest, if we divide it into 60 and 40%, that last 13 or 14% are going to divide by 60 would be spending it on investing, and they would be investing in Bitcoin. So out of that 14% that are left. So I just want to point out that the consumer has different ideas, because you've got the revenge spending. We want them to spend their excess savings, which David, right up there with revenge spending. You want me to spend my excess savings to do what? Save the economy. Well, what about saving me first, right? I am astonished at how policies by major corporations, financial corporations, and government are painting a picture that all of these things, revenge spending, that we're waking up out of this big sleep, we're going to spend all those savings. Well, last I looked at, the average 65-year-old has $133,000 saved for their retirement. I'm questioning. Yeah, I know, Craig. I'm questioning, where's the logic in this? Right? I mean, we're waking up out of the big sleep. I have a feeling consumers are waking up out of the big sleep, and they've got a different point of view than the ones that says come and spend and have.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I see it a little bit differently in that people have been spending. First of all, I don't think when we say the consumer, I'm such a believer in a segmented view of the market. Like, back when sustainability was on the rise, everyone said millennials who were much younger then, aging, but they just want to buy green product. But it was the same age group that was driving mass luxury, and everyone's trying to get Coach bags and so on and so forth. So there's different segments, and they're going to behave differently around this. And I do think a lot of people are in a financially better position today, regardless of their optimism or pessimism. But there are those who are not. So we got to factor that in. Some people are actually in a worse place. For the ones who financially can afford to buy if they want, I don't think they're going to. A lot of them have been buying anyway. They've been buying the home gym stuff all the way through the pandemic. But I think getting out, I think they're not going to surge to online buying because they could be doing that. I think there is going to be a momentary, even if it's for the novelty effect. I'm in Toronto. I want to go to Yorkdale, or I just want to get out and I want to interact with people again and call my friends. We'll go shop down Queen West. I think that will happen. And then the big question is, how long does that sustain, or does it tail off? But I really do believe, I forget the revenge part of it, but there'll be a getting out into physical space, restaurants, clubs, go see bands, all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then what? And I don't know what, I think there's still a lot of murkiness around what happens after.
Mhm.
I think it's that experience, right? People still want to have an experience. We can't travel overseas, or at least right now we can't, until we figure out, how to do that safely. So it's that experience of either travel or going shopping or being with your friends at a bar, like you said, sporting events, whatever that is. I think people still want to do that, and we want to be social creatures and be with each other. So I don't think that's going away, but I think definitely there will be some ebbs and flows as we go through this. So like in the US, I think we should be somewhat inoculated or vaccinated by May, late June. I think it's going to be longer than that. But, so the first half of the year is still going to be around vaccinations. But then the second half, I still think is going to be focused on, is it safe to go out? And what are we doing? And how are people responding? And what are protocols? And all of that.
There's a lot of things going on which we're skipping over, and we've got the impact of the media, we've got econometric models which are broken, we've got the hope of businesses that have kind of got through this, clawed on by their calluses to try to get to a place they can reopen that looks like 2019, because they're not doing very much innovation in stores. Then you've got these consumers wanting to get out, as you say, into public spaces. And at one level, they may say, oh, we're back to normal, because guess what? These shops or these stores have not changed. We are back to 2019. But all of a sudden, we'll be plagued with a whole range of economic fallout from this situation, which may mean that the people who you think might be going out and revenge spending actually haven't got a job.
Bingo. That is the issue globally. In developed countries, businesses have slowed down, shut down, people are unemployed, getting people back. And even the 200,000 some odd jobs that we got, the majority of them are part-time. That does not pay debt. It does not service debt. It does not put food on the table, doesn't pay the rent. So I'm somewhere else I'm with Gary on this one. I am not sold that everything is rosy and everything's going to pop open, everybody's going to go crazy. I agree with you, David. From a segment point of view, the people who have got money and have the ability to shop and feel comfortable with going out, they're the ones that are going to have the fun at first, right? They're the ones that are going to go out and splurge. But you cannot, not all retailers will benefit from that.
No, that's the key. There's going to be winners and losers. And your point about services, and I guess by the same extension, food service, there's only so much they can pick up from that. because of their own capacity. And I look at things like tourism and I think, well, if there's a big demand for it, and we can talk about the likelihood of domestic versus international tourism, but how many of the businesses that support tourism are in good shape to seize that opportunity? Like there could be a demand that goes unmet.
So I may ask a question of the group. So and we'll start with Craig. So when it comes back to waking up from the big sleep, what 2 or 3 things do we believe businesses should be acting on or have acted on already in order to hit the ground running?
Well, having their operations open and telling consumers they can come in or shop wherever they want. I think that's going to be important. Having products that people want, whether or not that's going to be tailored to them specifically. I mean, selling a ball gown at this point probably would only be a novelty item. Because wear a tuxedo. I mean, where are you going to wear it, right?
Speak for yourself, Craig.
It's true.
David's wearing it on the next podcast.
That's right.
I can't wait. I hope it's
Eating
Balenciaga, but bring a napkin. But really, I think hopefully instilling confidence in consumers that they'll come in and be safe. But I follow a lot of social media. I just try to figure out what's going on, and I think there's a major COVID fatigue happening, and it's a little bit scary because this could actually lead to some reckless behavior. I'm almost getting there. I mean, I'm not going out much, and I'm generally being careful. But as we hear news here about this, third wave coming up, I'm just like, I won't say the word. I'm tired of this. Like I'm just sick and tired of it. And what's going to be happening over the next few days, as we're recording this podcast, is there's going to be very significant protests around the country in major cities in Canada. With thousands and thousands of people to protest what's happening. And these same people, funny enough, if they have money, which some will, I'm assuming, are going to become consumers because they don't, they feel impervious to this, or maybe they've had it. But I think that there's a segment of the population that's just sick of this. There's so much information out there now, some of it being conspiracy theories that, this is a hoax. I don't believe it's a hoax personally. People are feeling that their personal freedoms are being stomped on. And I mean, I don't think everything is on the up and up in terms of what's happening with lockdowns and, with what government is doing around the pandemic generally. I mean, I think one of the dumbest and laziest things that we've seen are these prolonged lockdowns in places like Ontario, where I can't go across the street to a small store, but I can go, shoulder to shoulder in a Costco store and shop. It makes no sense whatsoever. And people are starting to ask questions. I've talked to smaller retailers that say they're going to go out and protest if there's another lockdown in Ontario. That they're to that point where there's a desperation, and they're super pissed off. And so I don't know. I mean, I think certain segments of retail are going to see a comeback. I live in Bloor Yorkville in Toronto, and I often am chatting, and I'll stand on my balcony, and I cannot believe how many designer bags that I'm seeing right now. It's incredible. It's I'd say more than before the pandemic. We've only been open for about there's a week or two, or a week and a half, I guess it's been. But I've never seen so many bags from Dior. I'm really impressed people are actually shopping there because it's so expensive. And even Harry Rosen, thank God. I mean, we need that store to stay alive, at least hopefully for a while. But I don't know, it's going to be interesting. And sorry, I think it just took a lot of time here to go over something I should have said in a minute.
No, because you covered it well. And if we take Canada, don't even look globally, just domestically. I'm out in Vancouver. We just got told, and what I'm hearing is the announcement that we can go to backyard and patio groups of 10 now. Is what I'm hearing is to make that statement, they are 99% sure that we're not going to rescind it. Like that would be the worst thing, is to be a little reckless with the opening and then have to pull it in again. So we're expecting now a rolling series of announcements that start to open up. But that's BC. So what's different? And then are we going to get a flood of people from Ontario and Quebec coming out to hang out in BC? Because it's more open here. So you're right about saying there's a lot of stuff still to kind of parse through, even around the vaccines and protocols before we get one part of the country waking up from their sleep while another is rolling over and snoring again, to use George's metaphor. Thanks, George.
Oh, you're welcome. Anytime I can give you a metaphor, but next time bring Dairy Queen for everybody. Okay. Christine?
Well, I think listening to what Craig said, I agree. And being in the US, of course, a Canadian in the US, I'm a little bit different perspective, and being on the West Coast and Portland, Oregon, a little bit perspective different here. And we have been slowly opening up. We've been doing it safely. I feel like we're seeing a lot of interesting things happening with small business opening up. So I'm seeing some new shops opening up, hybrid shops where you get 2 or 3 people together, which is interesting. So, and people sort of saying, I know it's crazy to open right now, but we've got a new business model, we're going to try it. Or, equally, I'm seeing some great old favorites shutting down. People are really sad. So, that whole shift is sort of happening. But I think for us, we've been told that by the 4th of July, we'll be able to have gatherings backyard with our friends and family. So, and a lot of the older population have already had their shots. And so it's sort of churning through. I know it's happening a lot faster. My dad in Vancouver just got his first shot today. So I think the US is maybe a little further ahead than Canada on that front. But there's still, concern across the country on, do we open up too quickly, or if we, are we not opening up fast enough? So you kind of get different perspectives when you hear things. And then, from the medical side, they're just sort of saying, look, it's like, you're on a run and that person's ahead of you and you're getting close to that person. You're not quite there, but you're almost there. And so you have to just put in that extra, time to get there. And I feel like that's kind of your point on the COVID fatigue. Like, we're all fatigued. Thankfully, the weather's starting to turn. So at least on the West Coast, we can get outside and be back out and not feel like we're trapped because of the weather.
George, that's why I think just in that moment, call it a month or weeks, if we get told you got a green light, I think we're going to be overcapacitated on all forms of transportation just for a little while. And not for everybody, but for the ones who feel safe doing it, they're not going to want to wait. They're going to go, I've been waiting.
Yeah.
Gary, what's the timeline like? What do you think?
I still think that we won't get much clear until 2022. But if we think about it a different way, if we've had a year already of this, and we've got a year ahead of us still of this transitionary kind of arrangement, wouldn't it be sensible? I know you can't say in March 2020 we're going to be like this for 2 years, so we better really rethink this whole concept so that when the economy and everything recovers, somehow we're going to be a compelling, exciting concept for people to come into our stores or shop on our website and know that they've landed in the right place. I think that we're in this world. We've got the media, we've got the medical professions, all trying to paint a picture. We've also got small businesses, particularly small retailers, hoping they can get through to the end of this process, thinking it's going to return to 2019. But actually it isn't. It's moved on. Consumers have moved on. Their needs, their wants, they've been rarefied. They've been, congregated or aggregated in a different direction from maybe the bulk of retailing. And so I think there's still going to be another 3 to 4 months beyond that where there's a big adjustment. So the retailing apocalypse, which should have happened already, and we think it's already happened, it's cleared out a number of companies. I think they were just trending into the x-axis. I think, for want of a better way of expressing, the retail apocalypse is still to happen, and it will happen thick and fast. But we have to kind of work through this process until we get there. And a lot of things will happen all at once. Our high streets, our malls, our public spaces will reshape. And going back to our last couple of episodes with Claude, it's when not the landlords, the retailers, the ecosystem all comes together in some way and said, this is going to happen, so we better be prepared for it. We can't go on with the concepts of old, back to the 1980s, and just keep refreshing. We have to have brand new concepts. They have to be compelling, exciting, and there has to be a reason to come to my store.
You know what's exciting about that for me, though, is if we're being honest about who we call the customer or the segments, we as shoppers don't have all the answers either. Like, we're going through all this new learning. We've had a year of how do we, even these little markers on a floor where we stand apart, but we're good learners. And I think coming out of this, there'll be a lot of experimentation, and I think we'll be part of that. But I don't think we'll be able to tell retailers and food service, here's exactly what we want for the year 2023. We're going to find our way with it, trial and error, and we'll kind of gravitate to the ones that are interesting us. But I like your point, Gary, that it'll be a bit of a discontinuation from 2019. I think that's a really good mindset to have.
You know, we've come from, you know, we started with the waking up from the big sleep. I'm going to take you somewhere real quick to somewhere else. I'm going to call it the Great Awakening. And I believe that COVID-19 in the next couple of years is going to give birth to the leisure society. And if you remember back in the 60s, everybody, you know, technology was going to, you know, separate us from a job. The robots were going to work for us. Well, that world is not going to happen, right? They've monetized the robots and the AI, right? So we're still working, but we're going to fight hard to have that free time coming from convenience. And we're going to take that free time when we carve it out, and we're going to start living. We're going to start traveling. We're going to start going to restaurants. We're going to go to theater. We're going to see our friends. But it's that timeline that it's going to take to get there. But I believe COVID-19 is bringing out the leisure society. And I think that is what's going to happen next. And I think we're all going to be shocked, and retailers need to get ready for this one. So,
or at least the leisure class, right? The very wealthy that are coming out of this, the K-shaped recovery, you're going to have basically serfs and
yep.
Well, we have it now, Craig, because the service workers are the ones in the pockets of Metro, Greater Toronto and Greater Vancouver. It's those that have to go to day jobs out in serving, like in hospitals, that are now the COVID hotspots. We're already seeing that divide, and I worry about that. I think we are going to get a greater divide coming out the other side potentially. But I agree with George. I think there will be a group who just says we're gonna enjoy life.
Yeah, I mean, I live in a building where half the people don't work. They used to spend half their year in warmer climates as well, but you know, that already is a leisure class. I know there was a book written about it that was theoretical, but the fact is, it's true. I mean, you'll see that more on the West Coast specifically, in a place that's beautiful with good weather. You're gonna have rich people that don't work. You get that less in Toronto, but I'm finding there is a leisure class in Toronto.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
There's one in Milton too. So
With
that, on that note, oh, there's one, me. So on that note, I want to thank all of you again for being so we can get together, and David's going to remember to bring ice cream for everyone.
There's a story we don't need to.
Yeah, I know, but you know, Gary Newberry, thank you. Craig Patterson, Christine Cowan, David Ian Gray, thank you for being here. And my name is George Minikak. Check us out on our website at thebusinessofretail.ca, and you can hook up with us on LinkedIn or Twitter, and listen to us on Apple or Spotify or any other platform that you think we should be on. Just send us a line and we'll look into it. Thank you.
You have been listening to the Business of Retail podcast, an unflinching strategic alternative to the conventional industry discourse. Thank you for joining us. For more information, please go to www.thebusinessofretail.ca.